There are adult themes in this episode, and it may not be appropriate for all for children or for all audiences. Hamas is not a euphemism; it's a very explicit term. So, if you're not comfortable with that, consider this a warning, and you might want to skip this episode. So, Hamas means violence, rape, kidnapping. That's one definition. There's another definition of Hamas, which is to wrong ethically, and part of that is to humiliate. We see that in Job 19:7. I'll read that, but you look for Genesis 16 while I'm going there, because that's an important one. So Job 19:7, it says, "Hen etzak Hamas v'lo e'aneh, ashava ve'en mishpat." He says, he says, "Behold, I call out Hamas, none answers. I scream and there is no justice." So the parallel here is I call out, I scream. What does he call out? Hamas! There's Hamas happening. And he says there's no justice. So Hamas here is injustice. Right, that's what the parallel tells you. And it's not necessarily violence. It's some wrong, some ethical wrong has been carried out against Job, right? That's what he's talking about here. Genesis 16:5.
And Sarah said to Abram, "The wrong done me is your fault."
Well, give us the background.
So Sarah didn't have children, and she said to Abraham, "Hey, look, God has kept me from having children. Why don't you take my maid and sleep with her, and I can have a son through her?"
What could possibly go wrong?
And that's what happened. He cohabitated with Hagar.
Ooh, an euphemism, cohabitated.
I am going to use euphemisms. And she conceived, and when she saw that she was pregnant, she looked down upon her mistress.
She's like, "Oh, I have a child and you don't. Ha ha."
No. So Sarah said to Abraham, "The wrong done me, it's your fault." But that's not the word. What does it say in Hebrew?
It says the Hamas. It says, "My Hamas is upon you."
Yeah.
Meaning the Hamas that was done to me is upon you. And here it's not violence. There's no violence at all.
No.
So my Hamas is upon you. I gave you my maidservant in your bosom, and she saw that she was pregnant, and I was humiliated or belittled, really. I was made light in her eyes. May Yehovah judge between me and between you. What a powerful statement.
That really is a powerful statement. I think that we should call that out just as a way. Guys, when somebody does you wrong.
Look, there have been situations where I've heard you say this, and I know I've said it myself, where I'm burning with anger, and I take a deep breath, and I say, "May Yehovah judge between me and that person." I'm turning it over to Yehovah.
Right.
Let go, let God, as they say in the modern
And when
terms.
someone does Hamas to you, sometimes the only thing you can do is say, "May Yehovah judge between me and this person."
Right.
Because his judgment is true. We know from the Word of God.
Right. So she says, "My Hamas is upon you. The Hamas that was done to me is upon you. It's you're responsible for it." And the parallel there is I was belittled in her eyes, or literally I was made light in her eyes. Right? So it's I was humiliated.
Humiliated, yeah.
Right. She doesn't actually say I was humiliated.
Right.
She says she despised me, right? I was made light in her eyes. But the result is I felt humiliation. And to be humiliated, that's Hamas. Which is, you can see how you get from that to rape or vice versa, right? That rape isn't about sex. Rape is about humiliating someone
And violence.
and violating them.
Yeah,
and violence.
it's about violence.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Hamas also means to violate the Torah. And an example of that is Ezekiel 22:26. I'll read that one. You open up Zephaniah 3:4. Remember, Zephaniah is just after Habakkuk. I don't know how to hear it.
Do you want to get it, or do you want to read the one you're supposed to read?
Okay, all right. Ezekiel 22:26. It says, "Her priests have Hamas my Torah and desecrated my holy things." To Hamas the Torah is to violate the Torah. And I didn't know until we did this study that there's another nuance that I missed for years when I read this verse. For decades I read this verse. And I didn't know there's a nuance that I missed. I won't share what that is until the
Read
end.
it again.
Her priests have Hamased my Torah. Okay. And I think your JPS will say they violated,
Yeah.
Her priests have violated my teaching, they have, right? Which is they have Hamased my Torah, it says. Chamsu Torati. They have done Hamas against my Torah and desecrated my holy things. So it means to violate the Torah. Mm-hmm. But why not just say violate? There is a word for violate the Torah. We'll get to that later, because I didn't know until we did this study. They did not distinguish between holy and unholy, and they did not make known the differences between unclean and clean. They hid their eyes from my Sabbath, and I was made unholy in their midst. Does that sound like anything we're familiar with? I don't know. I can't put my finger on it. People who hide their eyes from Shabbat and don't distinguish between holy and unholy, clean and I don't know what that could be. Anyway, let's go on. But that is to Hamas the Torah. Okay. I'm going to control myself. Zephaniah 3:4. What do you have in your translation?
Her prophets are reckless, faithless fellows. Her priests profane what is holy. They give perverse rulings.
Which is really strange, because it's almost the exact same phrase as in Ezekiel 22:26. Chamsu Torah. They have Hamased the Torah. Right? So it should have been translated here based on the JPS as they violated Torah. In both cases, Ezekiel 22:26 and Zephaniah 3:4, who's doing it? Kohanim, priests.
Oh.
And they're violating Torah.
Oh.
So why would it say they give perverse rulings? And the answer is that this is a different, even though they're both JPS, it's two different translators. And the other translator either didn't understand it or understood it differently. I would say he understood it wrongly, but that's my opinion and I'm right. He obviously had a different opinion. But what he was thinking is, okay, Kohanim give out rulings, which can be called Torah, and Chamsu Torah is they get, and Hamas is corruption, perversion. So they gave out perverse Torahs. They gave out perverse rulings, right? That's his thought process. And that's fine, okay, it's possible. But in both cases, you have Kohanim who are Hamasing the Torah. That means they're violating the Torah, not their own Torah, but the Torah. So anyway, so that I think it's interesting. Both are JPS, and it's two different translators. We did a very brief search to try to find out who was the translator of Zephaniah versus Ezekiel, and we were lazy and gave up. But if somebody can find it and leave it in the comments, that would be really interesting. Because I don't know. We must know the name or the people on the committee who translated, this is the 1985 JPS, Ezekiel versus Zephaniah.
Interesting.
Right? I mean, a little bit of research. It wasn't that important to us, so we gave up, right? But it should be, one should be able to find that out. Anyway, next definition of Hamas is a lie or deception. And that you could say is unethical behavior, but it's a very specific type of unethical behavior. And for example, Exodus 23:1 and Deuteronomy 19:6 and Psalm 35:11, those three verses have the phrase Ed Hamas, in Psalms it's plural, a Hamas witness or Hamas witnesses. Well, what's a Hamas witness? Is it a violent witness? No, he's not getting up in court and punching out the judge. That's not what it's saying. He's not humiliating the judge and you could say it's violence because he testifies against someone to be executed and that person's could be executed. And so that makes him a violent witness. That's what I thought at first. And then I kept doing more research and I thought it wasn't probably the case. It's a false witness, a lying witness. How do I know? Micah 6:12. You're right there next to Micah's a couple foot. No, the other way.
I haven't gone anyway yet.
No,
Which way do you want me to go? I'm picking up my pen.
Yeah, that way. Oh, there it is. Micah 6:12.
Okay. Micah 6:12.
Yeah.
Whose rich men are full of lawlessness and whose
the word is Hamas. They're full of Hamas.
Oh, full of Hamas, and whose inhabitants speak treachery with tongues of deceit in their mouth.
So here's what it says in Hebrew, or my translation of the Hebrew. Whose wealthy are full of Hamas, and whose inhabitants spoke falsehood, and their tongue of deceit is in their mouth. Right? So it's three different ways of saying they're liars and deceivers. They spoke falsehood, the tongue of deceit is in their mouth, and they're full of Hamas. So Hamas here, in this context of an Hamas witness, we see to be full of Hamas could be to speak falsehood or do falsehood, right? Well, we didn't see do yet. We're about to see that. Isaiah 53:9. Now, can you bring the NRSV? Because Christians traditionally say Isaiah 53:9 is about Jesus. The Jewish position, although there are multiple historical Jewish positions, the more common one today especially is that Isaiah 53 is collectively about Israel. There are Jews in the past who said it was about a specific person, who either lived in the past. Some people said it was King Josiah, some it was Jeremiah. Anyway, some say it to be the future Messiah. Isaiah 53:9.
They made his grave with the wicked and his tomb with the rich, although he had done no violence and there was no deceit in his mouth.
He had done no Hamas, is what it says. And we can see here, there's no deceit in his mouth, is the parallel to not doing any Hamas. So Hamas is to do deception, is to be a liar and deceiver, right? So Jesus or Israel, whoever it is not not doing any Hamas, is not a liar. And he was killed even though he didn't do any Hamas. That's really interesting, because I've heard from the other side, Jesus was a Palestinian.
Really?
Yeah, even though there was no such thing as a Palestinian in the first century, but whatever. All right.
Jesus
maybe he was a Pakistani.
he was a settler.
He was a Jewish settler.
He was
but that's
a
different
Jewish.
study.
I know it's a different
All right.
study, but
Psalm 27:12. Oh, you're so close. It's just to your Psalms. Now 27:12. Sword drill, sword drill.
I can find Psalms, I promise.
I believe you. It's the big one in the middle.
It is the big one in the middle.
27:12.
Psalms
And it
is
might be a
big.
different verse number in the English. Well, the JPS will have the Hebrew numbering.
Do not subject me to the will of my foes, nor false witnesses and unjust accusers have appeared against me.
All right, so here's what it says. Wow. Do not give my soul to my enemies, for they rose up against me. False witnesses who breathe out Hamas. And really, they blow out Hamas.
Well,
What are
that's
they
nothing
blowing out
like
Hamas? They're testifying falsely. They're liars. So Hamas actually means violence, unethical behavior, rape, kidnapping, pillage, but also lying. It means to spew out Hamas from your mouth is to lie.
So Nehemia, one of the things when we've covered these, as we've walked through, one of the things I noticed is some of the verses that talk about robbery, they talk about the pillaging. We haven't pulled any of those up. The plunder. Are we going to do that?
We said there were 6 verses that talk about that.
Okay,
And,
all
and we
right.
kind of were lazy
So
and
we've
told people
got
to look it up themselves.
Violence. We've got lying. We've got to do ethically wrong. We've got to violate the Torah, rape, pillage, plunder, humiliate, kidnap,
And to speak, did you say falsehood?
lies,
Right.
falsehood. Okay.